2025 to 26. This year's theme, Regions and Translation in Indian Writing, invites us to explore the richness of Indian regional literatures and their journeys into English. Today's symposium, titled Translating World Translation from Regional Languages to English, promises to be intellectually stimulating and thought provoking. We are delighted to have scholars, faculty members, and students gather here at this wonderful evening. Translation is not merely linguistic conversation, it is cultural negotiation. It bridges geographies, identities, histories, and voices. Particularly in the Indian context, translation becomes an act of reclaiming marginalized narratives and reshaping literary discourse. With that spirit, let us move to our keynote session. It is my honor to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Anusha Ravi Sood. Ma'am is with a career in television, newspaper, and digital newsroom. She has worked in some of India's prominent newsrooms like News 9, Times New, taking off from interest in these topics. Dabbling in translations came as curiosity. She will be delivering the keynote title, Translating Postmodern Dalit Literature, Bursting the Privilege Bubble. Good evening, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Jivita. I hope you don't mind if I have the camera on. Anybody who wants to is also free to do so. I've been told this will be 15 minutes at any point in time. If you feel I'm going too fast because I have to quickly, anything that you would like to add, I'll be more than happy to. So, yes, I'm a journalist. I am not a linguistic scholar. I'm not a student of languages like all of you and most of you perhaps are. But I am a published translator, and I think that pretty much gives me the privilege of speaking to all of you on translations from Indian languages. So this is the translated. This is my work of translation. This is a Kannada book that was written by a very popular Dalit writer in Kannada called Kotiganahalli Ramaya, and I had the privilege of translating his book. And this book is now published by the Manipal University Press under the name Let Polly Thrive. May anyone shout as they please. So when I was asked if I would like to speak to students about translations, I immediately said yes, because this is become my favorite topic to speak about ever since the book was published. I think it's a novelty factor. But more than that, what really interests me in the entire topic is how challenging translation as an art, as a skill, as a component of literature is. Thanks to the efforts of the recognition, rather, of course, efforts are from every quarters. Thanks to the recognition that Indian literature and translated versions of the Indian literature is getting on a global stage with a Booker Prize for Banu Mushtaq and her translator Deepa Bashti. I think it's more important for us to then acknowledging that there is a lot of space. There is an audience out there, and it is our responsibility to ensure that our literature is not bound by language. It's not barricaded by language. And if translation is going to help bridge that gap, then it's great. First things first, when I was asked to deliver this keynote, I wondered what the topic should be, and then I chose what mattered to me the most, or what my personal experience in translating this work was. And hence, the topic that I chose was translating postmodern Dalit literature, bursting the privilege bubble, because that is what happened to me when I started translating a piece of literature in Kannada. First of all, the challenge is it is in Kannada. The second challenge is that it is the language, it is the work, it is the art, and it is the writings of the marginalized community. First of all, translating from Indian languages to English itself is difficult because our grammar is different, our syntax is different. There are not actual specific translations for set words in English. Only when you read Indian languages, you may call me biased, only when you read classical, or I wouldn't say classical languages, only when you read your own languages and then you read English, you see how inadequate English is in expressing your lived experiences, your cultural references simply cannot be translated in English. So, hence, that is why I say this was an experience for me bursting this privilege bubble. This translating Let Polly Thrive, written by Kotikanahalli Ramaya, gave me a reality check of how much I don't know, how much experience I don't have, how much we all live in silos. We are a society, of course, but we live in silos. We work in silos because uh, the reality simply is too hard. It is too raw. It is too real for our fragile selves to come face to face with it. And that is a privilege. Living in a silo is a privilege. And literature, as always, brings new worlds alive, brings you or connects you with the world that you are not familiar with. And translation of Indian literature or Indian language uh, writings has done exactly that for me as well. So translations that way help break through these silos, um, and honestly give you a better understanding of people, language, identity, realities, the experience. And honestly, personally, it has been a very enriching experience for me. I am a beneficiary, and I'm sure others, when you all go on to translate or read translated works, you will also be such beneficiaries. In the book that I had translated and that was published by MUP, I have a translator's note that I would just like to read a couple of lines from it. This I'm talking about this in the context of Kannada, but this can actually be applied to all languages, to all translations, especially Indian languages. Translation of a play from Kannada to English is not easy. The languages, their form, structure, syntax, even emotions are widely different. Translating a Dalit Kannada play into English is even more of a daunting task because the language of the marginalized has barely any place in the mainstream. The language of the marginalized has only as much space in the mainstream as the marginalized themselves do, which is very little. And that is a very conscious decision. And that is a very conscious sidelining of the marginalized that we have practiced for centuries now. And that reflects in the way translations the translations become challenging in this concept. Why do I say that translating the voice of the marginalized is even more difficult? Is when I started translating this, I must tell you, I translated this just as a favor to a professor who was doing his PhD, and he was doing his PhD in postmodern Dalit literature. And as part of his PhD, he wanted some works to be translated, and this was just a favor I was doing to a professor. But what I ultimately realized when I was doing this is there are so many words, there are so many tones, experiences, phrases, instances that simply cannot be translated in English. Primarily, some words simply do not feature even in a Kannada dictionary. So I bought a lot of English to Kannada dictionaries, Kannada to English dictionaries. A lot of the words that are spoken, that are written, that have been brought to life by the author, Kotikanahalli Ramaya, simply has no space in a traditional dictionary, Kannada to English translation dictionary, etc. Because people who are writing this dictionary do not recognize these words. They do not come from this world. They do not know what these phrases mean, what specific I'm referring to. For instance, one specific word in the writings in the play is gongadi. I must have gone through some 6 dictionaries and I simply couldn't get the right meaning of this word gongadi to translate it to English. Ultimately, what happened is I happened to visit a tribal exhibition in Hyderabad. There, on one of the displays, was a piece of clothing that was displayed. It was made out of jute. It's basically your jute bags that you use to pack rice or grains or anything. This huge, if you can call it arisimutai, maybe in Tamil, perhaps. So something like that. It's basically a jute bag that is cut vertically and becomes like a cape. So there was no translation of that word in any dictionary that I could see. So I had to visually see to understand what it means. First is just the translation. So I could translate that word now. But what that symbolizes for the writer and the people that he was writing about in his piece came only after much more understanding. So that Gongadi becomes the only piece of shelter for a person from the marginalized community who's stuck in rain because he's not allowed to go anywhere else. He's not allowed to take shelter in anybody else's houses or their property. So the burden of specific experiences, specific words are simply not quite explainable in English as much. So this was some of the challenges that I at least faced. Then comes the point. So once you make the effort of translating, of trying your best to bring together uh, the exact word, the exact meaning of anything, because you're an outsider. I am an outsider. As an outsider, I cannot, as a privileged person, I cannot claim to know what the words mean, what the experiences mean, what the phrases mean. I can make an attempt. Thankfully for me, Mr. Kotikanahalli Ramaya lives in Kolar, that is just about 2.5 hours away from where I live in Bengaluru. So I could talk to him, I could ask him what he meant. For example, even the title of this book, nobody, I can guarantee you, has heard the phrase "let Polly thrive." I didn't know what Polly is. For most part of it, I assume Polly is the most common nickname you give to a parrot. That's what you read in English novels also. Polly is a very British pet name of a parrot. So I asked Mr. Ramaya once, what does it mean? Why is there a reference to a parrot in the title? To which he laughed and he said, the word Polly in this title basically errors, mistakes. So a joke that combines politics. So political mistakes, errors. So even with the whole title, so I was a little privileged. I could actually talk to the author. I shudder to think what happens to translators who are translating works of authors who are not with us anymore. As I was saying, why it was a humbling and a learning experience is also because the language of the marginalized, it's not just about the vocabulary. It's not just about not there not being actual translation for it. It's also because there is no acceptance for it. One of the editors who was doing the manuscript editing for us initial days before the book was set for publishing had a problem with a lot of cuss words in the book. They wanted to scratch out all the cuss words. What they didn't understand is removing all the cuss words, basically sanitizing your language, sanitizing the language of the people that are portrayed, that are characters in the book, is not what we want. That is not originality, that is not staying true to culture. This is what I mean when I say the language, the identity of the marginalized does not have the space in mainstream because the truth of the marginalized, whether it is their language, you call it cuss words, it is just day-to-day parlance for the characters in the book, for the writer who's brought these characters alive in the book. So who are you and I to say that this is not acceptable and this is? So even finding acceptance for day-to-day dialogue, day-to-day language of the marginalized in this book, as we have written and translated it, The Voice of the Dalit, simply needs to fight to find its space in mainstream. So I know right now I'm going beyond the challenges of just translating to now challenges of making the translation acceptable. The last component was the challenge in publishing. So at every stage, of course, there are a lot of challenges with publishing per se. There's a huge market for Indian literature. There is an even bigger market for translation. translated Indian literature. The same problem that we face with acceptance of identities, of language, of vocabulary, of dialogue, of speech, of presence of the marginalized in the mainstream is pretty much the same challenge we face in publication as well. Finding somebody to accept the text as is without sanitizing it, without trying to cover up, without trying to hide the reality or the experiences of the characters in this play is definitely a huge challenge. So, I would like to end this because I was told it's 15 minutes, so I'm just going to end it with just a note.
So you can have another 10 minutes. Five to
Okay,
minutes.
thank you.
Thank you. You have
Thank you.
10 minutes you can.
Right. By the time I finished this translation, the right phrases, I had to keep going back to the author to get me to help me understand each instance, etc. All of this, and then had to put our foot down to ensure that the language is retained, the originality, the feel, the experiences of the characters are all retained. And when I finished this translation, it had become actually a tool for me to understand a world that lay right before me in a different light, a reality check of sorts on how the largest groups of our society have the least voice, the least representation, even in literature. It's not just political representation, social representation, even in literature. The marginalized, of course, as the word, the term itself means, have very, very little representation. You need to put up a fight to actually ensure that you get a place at this table. And all of this is simply because of societal conditioning and my very limited exposure to what is considered as literature overall, mainstream literature by us, the vocabulary, the experiences, the situations, etc., is very, very different to the vocabulary, the dialogues, the situations, the experiences, even the aspiration, the thought process, and the climax. If you ever get the chance to read, I insist that you please do grab a copy, also self-promotion of the book. Grab a copy of the book or read it as and when you can. The shock value is definitely not something I was used to with my limited exposure of mainstream literature. This basically opened up a whole new world of literature for me, unapologetic, absolutely assertive in its nature, in its way, not shying away from anything that is true to the identity of the marginalized. For somebody who's used to very sanitized, supposedly clean, I hate sanitized language, sanitized literature. For anybody who's used to that, the literature of the marginalized, whether in its real form or in translated form, may sound awful. The characters are too loud, they are too assertive, they're too headstrong, they are too out there, all of that. But that I've understood. That's our conditioning. Our conditioning compels us to treat them like dirty words. It takes a patient reading and rereading and putting the characters in context of their lived experiences to understand that the words are who they are. It is the words that make them them. It is their language to use and express without fear of judgment from those who claim to be the flag bearers of language and culture. Somebody else's yardstick shouldn't apply to a different group altogether because our lived experiences are very different to the others. There is nothing uncultured about the language unless you want to see it through the tainted glass of caste and class. And that burden is ours to carry, not the marginalized. This has been my experience in translating Dalit literature, especially postmodern modern Dalit literature, from an Indian language. And this is something I wanted to share with all of you, the challenges as well as the takeaways. Thank you so much for the opportunity and for giving me a very patient hearing.
Thank you, ma'am, for that powerful and illuminating session. Your insights inspire us to explore the richness of Indian literature translation as a political. Now, it is my
Yeah,
privilege to
just a moment,
introduce
just a
our
moment, just a
second
moment, Jivita.
keynote speaker.
Anusha, since
Yes.
would you like to take a few questions now?
No
You
issues.
have
I'd be happy to.
one, two questions. If anyone has questions for Miss Anusha, you can post them now because she's leaving after this. So, what's your exposure to Kannada? Like, is it your what you call mother tongue? Did you grow up with that? Did you grow up in a
Kannada
household where Tamil?
is Yes, Kannada is my mother tongue. I've lived in Bangalore, studied in Bangalore all my life. So I've studied Kannada in school. I scored good marks also in Kannada. So I'm guessing that worked. So my exposure to Kannada has been academic in nature and not at the collegiate level, but just at the school level. And most of my I worked in Kannada newsrooms previously, where flawless language is something that a lot of people are proud of. But I am too scared to claim that I am very good at any language.
Mm. Actually, this question is not so much about the book as the job of a journalist, and how much does knowing Indian languages help? Knowing a couple of Indian languages, Hindi, and then the local language.
Honestly, the more number of languages you know, the better for you. Your brain is far better, functions better, more you learn different languages. But as a journalist, I specifically become I am more in the field of talking to people. Convenient, issues better. It's always language can be a barrier when you're not comfortable, but language can also be a great bridge. So it has actually helped me break the ice in urban areas. Knowing a language is not fully appreciated. Honestly, you just take it for granted. But in rural areas, it is fully appreciated. People acknowledge that you are making an effort to speak to them in the language that they are more comfortable with. It always helps understanding not just what the person is saying, but where they are coming from, the context to where they're coming from. And all of that, I think, has helped quite a bit in journalism. If anybody, I don't know if any of your students are interested in journalism, but more number of languages more employable you are. Let me also be very practical about it. Honestly, we live in a cosmopolitan era. A lot of people have to dabble in a lot of different things. So on a resume, looks great for your job. It'll be wonderful. But personally, it's a great skill. It's a people skill that will help you go a long way.
And how did you get to establish South First? I mean,
Sure. I was very happy working in a lot of newsrooms. Like my bio says, I've worked. I started my career with television, and I got disillusioned, and I decided that there is no journalism in television. I hope that someday I reconsider that decision and think that in India television channels are actually doing journalism. I worked with a national channel and I quit. After that, I joined digital space for a small bit, but I had never worked in a newspaper, which gave me the opportunity to explore that component as well. I worked with the New Indian Express for quite a bit. And when I was with the print, another digital website, my former editor-in-chief at the New Indian Express said that he was establishing a new digital website which is going to focus just on the southern states. And this is something that I have been very passionate about from day one. Because I worked in the national channel, I always saw how the South per se is sidelined, marginalized again from the mainstream. Being in the mainstream, to be marginalized in the mainstream is a terrible thing, of course. So since I worked with the national channel initially, I've always thought that the Indian news space has very little space for the South. And when this former boss of mine said he's going to start a digital only website that focuses primarily on the South, I just jumped on the bandwagon. Because all my career I've always, because I'm multilingual, I can speak all of the southern languages. So now I can understand and communicate in Malayalam. So primary languages of the South I could. And we thought it's a great place, it will be a great place to do what I've always thought is not done in Indian journalism. So that is how South First was set up. We are heading towards our fourth year. We do an annual conclave every year and bring on board a lot of policy makers. Your minister, Mr. PTR, has been a very, very constant presence in all of our conclaves. So yeah, that's the story of South First and why we set it up.
There's a question for you. Thank you for that, Anusha. There's a question from Benita. What is untranslatable in Dalit literature? Popped up now in the chat box.
What is untranslated? Everything. Actually, everything. There is a lot that is, for example, another Kannada writer that whose works I do think
No,
is pan
she meant
India.
untranslatable.
Untranslatable. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that question then? I think I
It's,
misread it.
I'll read it for you. What is left untranslatable in Dalit writings?
Experiences. As long
That-
as the translator is an outsider, which in most cases by design is, it will be always experiences. I do not believe that somebody who's not come up with those, who's not lived those experiences, can ever do justice to a translation. It may be an unpopular opinion. A lot of people may disagree with it, because one can always argue that academic interest in something is enough, or putting in the effort in understanding the language, the tone, the tenor is enough to translate. But I personally do not believe it is enough unless the translator also has the same lived experiences, or is willing to acknowledge that you do not have that lived experience to acknowledge.
Just one last question for me. Since I don't know anything about the text like polythrive, um, is the word poly there even in Kannada?
Yes, the original title is also Let Polly Thrive, Yare Yane Kugadli. So Yare Yane Kugadali is also a wordplay, just like how Polly is a wordplay. Yare Yane Kugadali is also a wordplay on a very popular Kannada song from the 60s. It was Dr. Rajkumar's song, where he is sitting on top of a buffalo. And the song is May Anybody Shout As They Please. That is the line. So the same line has been localized. Instead of Yare Kugadali, we have basically made it Yare Yane Kugadali. So that is how we speak in the villages. That is how local dialect of that song would be. So in Kannada too, the first part of the title is Let Polly Thrive. We've retained that in the English translation. Good, easy for me. It was already in English.
It was already in English. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Miss Preeti. Lovely talking to all of you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now it is my privilege to introduce our second keynote speaker, Dr. M. Kamalakkannan, Associate Professor of English, Presidency College. He will be speaking on Indian regional literature in English translation. I now invite Dr. M. Kamalakkannan to address the gathering.
Good evening to all. Am I audible? Any one of you please respond? Yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
you are.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Priti, for this lovely opportunity. Let me begin with a small personal note. This morning, actually, I don't know whether it is going to be a kind of a keynote address. Actually, I have a request to make. I have a plea, in fact. This morning, I was talking to one of my friends. She was mentioning about Kan Hang, a South Korean writer, as she was reading this novel called Vegetarian, which she said is a very good one. So I thought, let me also try, because she's a good reader and has a good taste. So I thought, let me also try. So I went to Amazon and typed Kan Hang. I'm not familiar with this author. She's a Nobel Prize winner, it seems. So I simply typed Kan Hang and Vegetarian in Amazon. The novel appeared. I mean, the image appeared. And just below that, I found Marakari, the translation of the same novel. And another image, it is in Malayalam. I was really wondering, how come so fast people have been translating, how to say, such foreign language texts into Indian languages? Okay, so this is reference one. Secondly, of course, Preeti knows, I'm not really very much into translation, all that as of now. I'm more into, to say, visual media, painting, and all that. But I had some touch with translation. In fact, my very first book was a translated work, which was called the Kalathai Vendra Kadidangal. I'll just share a bit of experience on that, and then I'll continue. So, uh, as usual, just like kind of young boy, I was reading a lot of books, and one book I came across was this world famous letters. And I was really astonished by the content of the book, mainly because it was having letters written by many important people in history, and almost all of them were quite romantic in nature. Like Benjamin Franklin has written a letter. Napoleon has written series of love letters. So in fact, that book's wrapper itself has Napoleon on it, on the horse. So that book was very inspiring. So I thought I can translate some of the letters, and it was published by Mitra Publications. But when I read it right now, I think it is what is a lot of more of a kind of barbaric translation, not a very systematically done. Okay. And then, what to say, for this talk, I was recollecting. Um, have I read, what to say, translated works? Yes, I did. So I was browsing my memory and I was sort of literally taking notes of the translated works, which I have read long back, nearly decades ago. Okay. Let me simply cite a few. Some of them I have read fully, some of them I couldn't continue. Maybe the translation was not that appealing, or maybe the length of the book couldn't make me continue. Okay. For example, in Bengali, Arogya Niketan by Tarashankar Banerjee, which was one of the finest works I have ever read, which talks primarily about the passage of time, how the medical science itself, so to say, evolves over time between Ayurveda and allopathy, along with the human life. And Maitreyi Devi's It Does Not Die. In fact, after listing down the books from my memory, I will tell you, I'll share you one secret, um, share with you. And then In Search of the Blue-Throated Bird by Atin Bandyopadhyay. And then in Hindi, The Night's Move by Giriraj Kishore. And in Kannada, Grahabanga and Parva by S.L. Bhairappa. I think I would say most of us would be familiar with the rivalry between S.L. Bhairappa and U.R. Anandamurthy. Though they wrote in Kannada, they did not agree with each other's rivals. In fact, S.L. Bhairappa was very much against U.R. Anandamurthy's posting as the head of Sangeet Academy during those days. We were quite familiar with the controversies and all that long ago. And then, of course, Sivarama Karant, everybody knows, one of the greatest writers. And Masti Venkatesa Iyengar, Chikkavira Rajendra, again in Kannada. And in Malayalam, all of us should be familiar with, like Bashir, Tagari, Sivasankaram Pillai, of course, Kesavadev, and many more others. And of course, in Marathi, you have V.S. Kantekar, Yayati. Of course, I couldn't finish it fully, but I could recollect the pages I have read. And in Punjabi, you have Nanak Singh, like the watchmaker and all that. And again, in Telugu, Urdu, there are many more novels. Of course, in Urdu, it was Kurolitain Haider, The River of Fire. So these are all the works which I was familiar with. All are translations. Now, the secret is, I read all these novels in Tamil. And all these novels are available in English also. There are other works which I have read only in Tamil, which are not available in English. That is a different list. But this particular list, whichever I have read right now, it is in Tamil, I read, but these books are available in English also. And now I should very thankfully recollect the days in which we used to visit Sangeet Academy Publications and the NCBH, the New Century Book House, and the National Book Trust, where they give you voluminous books for a very less price. For 40 rupees, 50 rupees and all, you will buy voluminous novels there. All of them are translated works. I very much recollect those days, even in the book fair in Chennai. Such books were quite available. But mostly, I prefer to read them in English. I mean, in Tamil. But they're all available in English too. Now, my plea is from other languages in India and the various other languages across the globe. We have been importing material, literary works, into Indian languages and also in Tamil. But how much do we export? Of course, there is a sizable corpus which is getting translated, and they do have a market. For example, I should say Perumal Murugan has become a kind of global celebrity right now. So almost all his works are getting translated. And one of the top tier writers, in my opinion, M, some of his works, not all, but some of his works have got really translated. And Tamil writer Jayamogan has taken some initiatives for translating his works, and he's conducting programs abroad to popularize his Vishnupuram publications and his works through the publication in English also. But apart from these handful of writers, what about a great many Tamil writers from the, what to say, olden times till the modern times, when they are going to get a kind of visibility? For example, Nanjil Nadan, and then Su Venugopal. To my knowledge, I think one or two stories have been translated and anthologized. But I think he's a writer of the global standards, but very few have got translated. And then Su Venkatesan. In my opinion, Kamalakkannan is the only historical fiction written in Tamil. Let it be Kalki or Chandilian, all of them wrote only historical romances. The only historical novel written in Tamil, in my opinion, I very strongly place it on record, it is Kamalakkannan. But translation? We have Leo Tolstoy, we have Dostoevsky in English and Tamil, maybe in other Indian languages. And Gabriel Garcia Marquez, he is available in Tamil now. And many more other writers. But what about the significant Tamil writers when they'll get exported to English? Not only to English, but also to other languages. Of course, in Indian languages. So it is my humble request and plea to Preeti and team. I think Preeti is a very capable teacher and very influential, having a lot of contacts. So I expect her to train her students to translate works. Translate works of great merit. Why? Because translation is a very, very dangerous game. If you simply slip somewhere, it will spoil the entire meaning. For example, on the other day when we were talking with writer Perumal Murugan, he was sharing his experience. In one of his novels, he was mentioning the word card. Card. And the translator, he simply translated that into jungle or forest, which has no context at all. Unless someone who is from a rural area, card is not forest here. It is Vayakad, which is actually the field. One of my very close friends from Pollachi, he very casually talks about card. Amma kaatla vela senjittu irundanga. Card means for them it is Vayakad. In amidst the card, I mean the field, they will have their house. It does not mean it is a wild forest. But without knowing this kind of nuances, translation is not really possible. But I think the students are really capable. Once they fine tune their language in, how to say, one or two languages, they can really do wonderful translations. And Sundara Ramsamy, it is not only happening from Tamil to English, sometimes it might happen from English to Tamil also. For example, Sundara Ramsamy, in one of his, Sundara Ramsamy is a very popular Tamil writer. He cites how a translator has done a blunder. The English expression is 1 rupee note. I repeat, it is 1 rupee note. The translator uh, he has written it as ஒரு ரூபாயும் ஒரு குறிப்பையும் ஒரு ரூபாயும் ஒரு குறிப்பையும், which he is translating as the 1 rupee is the currency and note has become a குறிப்பு, become the குறிப்பு. So this is how to say translation is working sometimes. Okay, and in the case of classics, it is also a kind of evolution. Um, One of the best examples I can cite right now is G.U. Pope's translation of Tirukkural, in which, to say, in the case of Makkatperu or Pudalvarai Perudal, he has translated it as obtaining of sons. Sons, where there's a very strong gender bias. Today, women will not really accept that. But later translators have, to say, changed it into getting of children, which is more of a gender neutral term. So this is my very humble plea or request to Preeti and her team. Please train the students to translate the quality of works, as the publisher, the previous speaker has already mentioned, which has a very wide market. Of course, machine translation, Google translation, all these are at play. But yet, someone who is really, really skilled in 2 different languages, and if at all they could do real translation, they do have a very big market. I mean, the job market. So, best wishes to Preeti and her team, and thanks for this opportunity. That's all from me. So, this is my request. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamal. Actually, I think that that I had to, what do you say, the wherewithal to facilitate this kind of thing, but you have sown the idea in my head. Yes, I have been thinking about the linguistic diversity in Queen Mary's College. So we started a languages club this year, Kamal. And we have Urdu, Sanskrit, and Tamil, English, Telugu. And we were bringing people of the different languages together. And last year, the theme for our retrospectum was a celebration of linguistic diversity in Queen Mary's College. So we are attempting to, we have that vision to bring, the people of different languages together. And we also thought of bringing out a kind of a book on works from different languages. We have also, I also wanted to share with you that in our translation paper, we have one unit on learning new languages. So we give them a basic vocabulary from for a couple of foreign languages and a couple of Indian languages. And of late, we are identifying the Urdu-speaking students on campus, because realize that Urdu is a language which is slowly, fading away. And that's one. These are things that I was thinking of. And of course, we have a translation project. Instead of the dissertation, we have translation for second MA. They translate a text, and 2 of our students will present now. And maybe we can continue this conversation after they present. Thank you for your presentation, Tom.
Thank you, sir, for that insightful exploration of regional literature and its transformation in English literature. Your track has given to reflect upon. Now, we move on to the student paper presentation session. First, I invite Ms. Reena Jacqueline, 2nd MA English, Queen Mary's College, to present her paper titled Bhaktin by Mahadevi Varma.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Reena Jacqueline, a second year postgraduate student from Queen Mary's College. Today, I'm going to present the problems encountered in translating the short story Bhaktin, written by Mahadevi Varma, a prominent Hindi writer and important voice in Indian literature. Mahadevi Varma was a leading voice of the Chahavat movement, a literary period known for romanticism, mysticism, and emotional intensity. Born in 1907, she was not only a distinguished poet but also a prose writer, educationist, and social reformer. She worked actively for women, education, and empowerment, and is often called modern Meera. Because her poetry expressed spiritual longing, devotion, and deeper responsiveness. However, in her prose, especially in sketches like Bhaktin, her style becomes more direct and realistic. She, ref- she uses refined Kharibori Hindi and adopts a compassionate yet socially conscious tone. Even in the simple languages, her writing carries a deep emotional responsiveness. Bhaktin presents the real life story of Mahadevi Varma's domestic helper, whose original name was Lakshmi. She was born in Jusi village in Uttar Pradesh and the only daughter of Kauhar. After her mother's death, she was brought up by her stepmother. She was married at a very young age, and after her father's death, her stepmother took control of the property. Since Lakshmi had three daughters and no son, she was mistreated by her in laws. Although she worked hard with her husband to build a secure life for her children, tragedy followed her. Her husband died early, and later her eldest daughter also became a widow. Her in-laws tried to control her property and forced decision through the village council, which deeply hurt and shamed. Lakshmi left her village and moved to the city. In the city, she began working in Mahadevi Varma's household and requested that her real name should not be revealed. The author affectionately called her Bhaktin because of her devotional nature. Bhaktin proved to be a loyal, self respecting, and devoted. She managed the household sincerely and became a trusted companion to the author. Through her life, the story highlights women's suffering, social injustice, courage, and dignity. The narrative does not end with a dramatical conclusion, but leaves reading leaves reader reflecting on the unfinished struggle of many women like Bhaktin. By translating Bhaktin by Mahadevi Varma into the Dage language, I encountered several linguistic and cultural challenges that requires a careful interpretation and research. One of the major difficulties arose from misunderstanding a proper noun. Initially, I interpreted the word juicy as meaning full or abundantly full. However, in the short story, the word actually referred to juicy, a locality in Uttar Pradesh. It is not used in a literal or descriptive sense, but as a proper noun indicating Bhaktin's birthplace. Historically, Jusi was known as Prashtanpur, and in the contemporary period, it has been administratively merged as a part of Prayagraj. This example highlights how misunderstanding a proper noun as a common adjective can create confusion in translation, especially when cultural and geographical knowledge is limited. Another significant challenge was translating culturally loaded expression. One of the such phrase was Narova Kunjara Va. Literally, it means a man or an elephant, but it carries a deep cultural reference from the epic Mahabharata. During the Kurukshetra war, Krishna planned a strategy in which Bhima killed an elephant named Ashwatthama. When Dronacharya asked Yudhishthira whether Ashwatthama was dead, Yudhishthira replied ambiguously, stating that Ashwatthama is dead, without clarifying whether it was the man or the elephant. This is an half truth misled by Dronacharya into believing that his son had died, thereby weakening him emotionally. Translating this phrase is challenging because its meaning is not just literally, it carries meteorological, cultural, and emotional significance without explaining the background. The English translation may fail to convey its depth and irony. Another difficulty I faced was the word Handaya. In the story, it is mentioned that at the age of 5, Bhaktin was married off to Handaya. Initially, I was confused whether Handaya refers to a rice beer or a place. After a careful research, I discovered that Andhya is actually geographical name, a village in Uttar Pradesh near Prayagraj, and is a regional pronunciation used in a local dialect. This expression made me to realize that a proper noun noun, and religious expressions can create ambiguity if the translator is not familiar with the cultural and geographical background. These challenges help me to understand that translation is not only the transfer of words from one language to another. It involves preserving cultural context, historical reference, and emotional depth in order to maintain a true essence of the original text. In Bhaktin, Mahadevi Varma effectively used dialect to create realism and authenticity. She employs refined Khari Bori Hindi, such as the WestIndi dialect that later become a foundation of a modern standard Hindi and Urdu. She softened the Khari Boli by incorporating the tenderness and lyrical quality traditionally associated with Braj Bhasha. She also enriched her language with delicate vocabulary from Sanskrit and Bengali. This blending gives her prose grace, emotional richness, and stylistic elegance. Through religious expressions and rural speech patterns, the author preserves Bhaktin as a social background and a cultural identity. The dialect strengthens the emotional and realistic impact of the story. In conclusion, Bhaktin by Mahadevi Varma presents the life of an ordinary woman with extraordinary strength and dignity. Through simple yet powerful narration, the author highlights social realities such as gender discrimination, poverty, and injustice. While translating the story, I realized that language carries culture, history, and emotion within it. A proper known dialect expression and mythological reference require a careful understanding to preserve a true essence of the original text. Thus, Bhakti is not just a story, but the reflection of many unheard voices. Translating it is both a challenge and a responsibility. Thank you, ma'am, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Reena Jacqueline, for your insightful presentation on the difficulties faced during translation. It was very informative and engaging. Next, I invite Ms. M. Kowsalya, 2nd MA English, Queen Mary's College, to present her paper on the title Shadow of the Mind.
Good evening, everyone. Today I'm going to present the problems encountered in translating the short story Ananiyal, written by Pudumai Pittan. Translation is not simply changing words from one language to another. It is a complex process of transferring meaning, emotion, culture, and psychological depth from the source language to the target language. One of the most important principles in translation is equivalence. That is, how far the translated text reflect the meaning and essence of the original. However, complete equivalence is almost impossible. This is because languages differ in grammar, vocabulary, cultural expressions, and emotional intensity. Especially in literary translation, the translator must carefully balance meaning, style, tone, and cultural context. In this presentation, I will discuss the major translation challenges I encountered while translating this short story from Tamil to English. Here is the introduction to the author, Pudumai Pittan. The short story that I have worked is by Pudumai Pittan, is one of the most important modernist writer in Tamil literature. He is known for his realistic narrations, psychological depth, and bold treatment of social themes. His works often explores human emotions, inner conflicts, social hypocrisy, and gender relationships. Unlike traditional romantic stories, his narratives focus on the complexity of the humankind. In Mananiral, he presents the emotional imbalance between a man and a woman in a relationship. The story deeply examines love, attachment, dependence, fear, and rationality. This psychological intensity makes the story powerful but also difficult to translate. The short story Mananiral explores the intense emotional dynamics between a man and woman in a relationship. The woman gradually falls deeply in love with the man, becoming emotionally dependent on him, finding her happiness in his presence. When he suddenly stops visiting, she feels heartbreak, confusion, and longing. Yet her love persists despite the pain. The man, however, perceives her attachment as overwhelming and fears the responsibilities and consequences of the relationship. Struggling between emotion and logic, he chooses to distance himself, believing that separation is the wiser path, even if it is causes temporary suffering for both. Now I will discuss the problems I encountered during translation. When translating this short story, the first major issue was equivalence. As we know, a translation must reflect the meaning and emotional essence of the original text. But Tamil and English function differently. Tamil expressions are often emotionally intense and culturally rooted. English, on the other hand, tends to be more direct and less metaphorical. Because of this difference, achieving complete equivalence was very challenging. The praise வாழ்க்கையில் அடிபட்ட சர்ப்பம் போல் அவள் நெஞ்சு துவண்டு கொண்டிருந்தது was difficult to translate. In Tamil, this simile powerfully expresses wounded pride and emotional suffering, but if translated literally, the emotional depth becomes weaker in English. So the challenge was how to preserve the both metaphor and emotional intensity without sounding unnatural in English. The word "sasuvadamaga" carries a poetic meaning of internal emotional attachment. If I translate it as permanently or eternally, it sounds too plain in English. The devotion and emotional richness are reduced. So the difficulty was maintaining poetic beauty while keeping clarity. The praise "கண்களில் ஒத்திக்கொள்ளுதல்" is culturally loaded. In Tamil culture, it suggests deep affection and reverence, as if something is so precious that is placed in the ices. English has no direct equivalent for this expression. Therefore, preserving its cultural and emotional meaning was challenging. Onomatopoeic expression "dabar", this word represents the sudden bursting of dreams. Tamil uses sound expression effectively to show emotional shock. English does not have an exact sound equivalent that carries the same emotional impact. Therefore, reproducing both sound and feeling was difficult. கரையான் அரிப்பது போல, this simile expresses slow, painful emotional suffering. Tamil readers immediately understand the intensity of this comparison. But in English, the image may not carry the same familiarity. Finding a cultural meaning was a challenge. The word Bhakyam does not deeply mean luck. It carries sense of divine blessings or spiritual fortune. English words like luck or privilege cannot fully express this depth. So the translator struggled to convey cultural and emotional richness. To conclude, Translating Mananiyal was not just a linguistic task, but a cultural and emotional negotiation. The major challenges included lack of direct equivalence, cultural expressions, poetic imagery, emotional intensity, onomatopoeic words. This experience shows that translation is not word replacement, it is an act of interpretation, sensitivity, and creativity. With this, I could like to end my presentation. Thanks for providing me this opportunity. Thank you all.
Thank you, Kowsalya, for your informative presentation on the difficulties faced during translation. It was very clear and insightful. We shall now move to the interactive session. Participants may kindly raise their questions or post them in the chat box.
Do we have one more paper presenter?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you can conclude. I think sir sent a message. Uh, okay, sir says he's getting a call and he cannot. He was supposed to respond to these things, but sir was our neighbor. He'll come anytime to QMC, so we can conclude the session. Yeah, teachers who have guided translations who are on this call, would you like to share something? Who has guided these two children who presented? Reena, your guide is?
Vasugi, ma'am.
Yeah, I congratulated Vasugi ma'am also. And Kowsalya?
Angel, ma'am.
Angel. Okay. So congratulations to both the teachers, Vasugi ma'am and Angeline ma'am, for guiding these two students. And the the work is, I'm so happy to see how they have been uh, very honest, not trying to manipulate the text for themselves or doing any slipshod work, or um, we could make out very clearly that they have not relied on content which is uh, digitally available, but they have their in-depth engagement with the text is palpable. So thanks to Reena, thanks to Kowsalya, and all the other students who didn't avail this opportunity. I hope that you get another opportunity and that we become that QMC English becomes a bastion of translation activity. I hope to engage more scholars and professors like Professor Kamalakkannan. Let's see how we can do it. Maybe we can do it through our languages club, where we have a diversity of languages: Urdu, Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, and this has been a long cherished dream to showcase the linguistic diversity of QMC. And this session was probably a pointer to, or probably uh, a message, carried a message for us to go in the direction of making translations available and engaging with with translation as a department and as a college. Um, even in the second year, for the second year students, we are encouraging them to learn new languages. They have a paper in translation studies, which they could have joined, but we failed to communicate this to them. So, in any case, I think we are new vistas are opening for us. The Kamal sir said something that I actually didn't think of. So we'll take the encouragement from him and we will work more in the area of translation. So we can conclude this session. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, ma'am. As we come to the end of today's enriching symposium, I extend my heartful gratitude to our esteemed keynote speakers for their invaluable insights, to our student presenters for their dedicated research, to the organizing committee of the Research Club, to all faculty members, scholars, and participants for making this session meaningful. Thank you all for your active participation. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye. Thank you.